So in this video, we're going to talk about what made the twist in this film so interesting, as well as we're going to take a look at some of the lighting that happened in the film to take this scene and break down why it was so intriguing and had so much depth to it, as well as maybe take a look at a couple of ways we could use the lighting from that film and use it on another set to tell a story. Alrighty, welcome back to another lighting challenge. I had a lot of fun doing the last one on my own short film, and I was super surprised how many people actually asked me to break down the lighting in their short films. So we're taking a look at this film, which I think is super dope. And what I want to kind of do is not watch the entire film. So if you haven't watched it, please go watch it now. I don't want to spoil anything for you. It's a really, really cool film. But what was interesting about it to me was the story and the entire film was from the perspective of a filmmaker, which I think is kind of fun and unique for us to get inspired as storytellers. One of the people that many of us filmmakers understand is other filmmakers. And it's a really, really easy place to tell a compelling story because we know the effects and emotions that they're going into. So let's jump into it now. That was a really cool intro. All right, so I can already tell this was a pretty big budget short. Like they had a full crew, they had an actual film set, a bunch of people involved. But one of the things I kind of wanted to point out that really intrigued me at first was it started out black and then you do like a cross dissolve up. They did a really interesting thing in this film where they started black and then they actually just cross dissolved into this flag, so it felt really natural. And I think that's something that we don't always take into account. Like sometimes we want to start with that black dissolve, but you could do that in anything. You could do that with a wedding film, with a documentary, with anything at all, to where you start in a dark area and you come out of it with some kind of movement to reveal the film. Oh, my daily. And that is a really fun character reveal. So there's some motivation to actually go up. So I think a lot of times you just want to move the camera and there's really no reason to actually go from one thing to another. Whereas in this scene, the character came off, like the person they were following starts walking off. And then the new subject is this character here, which you might think is an important character, but then you follow what he's doing, which is pushing a light upwards to reveal the actual main character. And then they talk about the title of the film, and then they show the main character really pretty lighting as well as really fun composition in their trailer. This is really, really good so far. Oh my gosh. So check out the corners of the frame here. There's like these balls or these ovals around the edge of the lens. I don't know if that's natural or if they did this in post, but a lot of times this is unnecessary, but I'll explain in a second why I think it's so good for this film.
You may enter.
Audio's a little hot.
Hello. Nice to meet you. I'm Stacey.
Oh, hello. You must be the new PA.
The what?
The PA, darling. The personal assistant.
Interesting.
Yeah, I guess you could call me that.
My name is Peggy, but I'm not sure if you've seen me before on the silver screen.
So I'm not... Okay, she just said a line that I'm going to let you listen to right there.
My name is Peggy, but I'm not sure if you've seen me before on the silver screen.
Oh, I don't watch much telly, to be honest.
Okay, so this is really cool. I'm gonna be wrong here, but she just talked about being a character on the silver screen, and I normally am not a big fan of overly obnoxious Victorian style characters because most people can't pull it off. Like there's a couple of people like Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings, beautiful performance, Count Dooku, like characters like that crush the performance, but a lot of people don't. And even this is it's hard to pull this performance off. So she did really good with what she had, but I think that most times I don't go for it. But I feel like in this instance there's like an exaggerated feel that she's this prestigious actress, and then she kind of presses into it in her performance. And then what really stood out to me, she said the silver screen, which is a pretty dated term, and I'm not sure if that's like TV or if that's actually film. I think that might be film, like actual old term for film. And then what's cool with that is you have these like gold, like not even gold, white, silverish lights, and then all of the lens flares are silver, like this memory of an actual silver screen. And I think that really plays well into amplifying the character.
Screen.
Oh, I don't watch much telly, to be honest.
Telly? Telly? How dare you? I work in cinema. The movies.
She answered the question for me.
Quite all right, darling. Quite all right.
So, you mentioned you work on films? Anything I would know?
I've worked on many films and worked with many talents.
Okay, so I'm going to pause and I might skip through this a little bit here. So she said something right there that was such a brilliant tool to be a calling back. And you feel like you're this character. She's a PA or a personal assistant, or maybe even like an actual producer on set, and goes into the actress. And she's like this prestigious actress and you need to respect her even if you're a producer. So it's this awkward conversation. And you even see like some of the cinematography things that I think are cool in this is like you're doing these over the shoulder to the mirror shots to frame both of them. So you're getting some depth on the foreground because you're in such a small space. Oh my gosh. Such a great way to get extra depth in a room is to use depth not in the background, but like up in front of you. Like, hey, this is my phone, but this is me. And you can see like there's some blurred out backgrounds. And they did such a good job here creating a super deep cinematic scene in a super confined space. Something we do a lot is say that we can't get cinematic depth with either a wide lens or with a small space, because you in a small space you need a wide lens to get the shot, and then also with a wide lens you have a less shallow depth of field. But I'm pretty sure that the shot that we're looking at right here might be like at the tightest a 35, but I think it's probably closer to a 20. And if you're having a 20 and you have it at maybe T2.1 or f2.1, you're not going to have a lot of shallow depth of field from the lens. So they're shooting over the hand to give some motivated depth. And then they're shooting into the window to really double the length of the room. That's such a brilliant way to do that.
Ridley Scott, Julian Fellows. In fact, the last film, well, it doesn't matter.
Very interesting. So, all right, I'm going to there's a bunch of really cool dialogue. Again, go check out the film. I kind of want to focus on the narrative and then the cinematography in this. So she stops right there, and this is where we're going to skip around, and mention something that she doesn't quite want to remember. I think that's brilliant. And then the rest of their dialogue here is they kind of have this cool conversation. You get some cool profiles. You see here she's hairlit, which really adds some depth. And then these might be practicals, but and you can see they're kind of weirdly looking with all the morphiness. But there's a possibility that she's being keyed from something else. But these might be quasar science tubes in the place of something like a fluorescent to get some better quality light. And if you look at her, she's soft lit. There's some shape, which is probably coming from this. And then you have the light around the back of her. And we'll try and mimic that here in a second. But what I think is really, really interesting is there's a lot of back and forth with the stage design and the depth in the design. But then also, just throughout their conversation, they start to get a little bit closer. So I'm going to skip past some of the dialogue here so you can go watch the film and really enjoy the whole thing. But this is a really, really cool way to contrast. So she's walking down a hallway, shows what she's got. A similar entrance into the last scene, right? You walk into the same room.
Oh, hello. You must be the new PA.
Yeah, I guess you could call me that.
Again, so I kind of wanted to compress everything down. That was so cool. So if you didn't catch it, I'm kind of breaking it down for you, but I'd really recommend trying to kind of figure it out for yourself. So go ahead and pause. She thinks that she's an actress and she's not anymore. And the PA is actually a caretaker at a nursing home. I think that was such a beautiful way to kind of show the story as a whole. And what is really astounding to me for this entire film, for one thing, he told me it was shot in Blackmagic, and I'll throw up an actual graphic of which Blackmagic camera it is. But if this is the Pocket 4K looks gorgeous. Any of the Blackmagic production cameras also look gorgeous, and they're super cheap. And then you could pull off all of this lighting with some really, really cheap lighting. What went into making this film great was really good set design, really good props, really good, honestly, like extras to create the environment, and then a very well crafted story. And I love how they executed this, from all of the different cinematography choices, and then even in the story writing choices and the story structure. It opens and closes in such a similar way. What was it like to remember to be an amazing actor or actress? And then display those different experiences visually. The silver screen was an old memory for me. What if we decided to make a lot of the color palettes of the brighter parts of the image silver? And then what if we also pulled her experiences to find out that she is only remembering these things? And there's a really dramatic, tense point in the middle of the film where she realizes that she's not that amazing, prestigious actress anymore. So if you haven't watched the film, go check it out. It's definitely worth watching. It's really, really cool. And what we're going to do now is take a look at a couple of the specific scenes, break down the lighting, look at what gear we could have used to shoot it, and then figure out how we can do that in our films as well. All right, so we're here in Cinetracer and we have a couple of interesting things going on. So we wanted to recreate the small space, and I honestly think we have a little bit bigger of a space in this scene than we would have had there, but I think a couple of things could be adjusted fairly easily to emulate an even smaller space and still get a similar result. And if we look at what's actually going on in camera, it's pretty similar to the scene that we were able to get in the film. One of the main differences that you can tell inside of the scene is definitely the contrast ratio and how dark some of the moodier parts of the image are, but there's some limitations to using the game on bouncing light. If we were in the scene and there was a bunch of tube lights that were softer going all around, we'd have a lot more bounce filling up the room. And if you look, we actually have similar lights that would be on the wall, as similar to the tube lights that were in the film, but these are actually just Quasar Science tubes that are set to a 5600 white output, and our camera is set to balance at 5600, which is giving this gold feel everywhere. There's some grittiness to the darkness in the background, but all of the lights have this clean silverish look, which again feed into the silver screen feel. But if we back up and look at what's actually lighting the entire scene, there's a couple of different things going on. We have an LED panel going through a cookie and flag to create this shape and shadow on the background to give a little bit more of a broken up background, considering it's just flat. I put a pipe back there to emulate some of the strange things that were inside of the scene as well. And then we have an LED panel raised fairly high, hitting the back of her head. This allows there to be a hair light on the back of her head, which helps to break up the scene and to separate her from the background. Now, these are really, really simple lights. Again, this could be a Yongnuo 216, one of the cheaper Good Video Maker COB lights, or a Godox SL60. There's not really a particular light that this is perfect for, but it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. You could set up this entire scene for about $500, or even as cheap as $200 if you went for really budget gear. One of the pieces of lighting you may have not noticed is I shot an LED panel through a piece of diffusion to bring up the overall ambience in the room. You can balance this off to the background, and you can even bring up the contrast ratio by simply helping with this light. And if we frame the shot correctly, we can even get a little bit of that background. And I love being able to have diffused lit windows because it gives this airiness and this beautiful highlight blooming feel to the windows. This is accomplished through a bunch of different ways, but I love being able to just have diffused windows and light shooting through them. Even if it doesn't look natural, I think it looks really fun in an image. So I've brought up the light on the far side of her, and I really feel like it helps to bring up some definition into the scene. If I bring my exposure down by one stop, it gives this dramatic flair to the scene that may not be desired, but if you're going for something a little bit more intense and you feel like the lighting is flat because it's all on one wall, if you bring down the lights of one of your lights in one of the areas, it's gonna help give some shape and definition. And to think about which light you're doing that with is going to affect the area of shaping that's happening on the face. And again, if you wanted to save some money and not buy Quasar Science tubes, you could easily pick up a set of these Chinese knockoff tube lights off of Amazon and get 6 of them for 40 bucks. You're gonna use these for a bunch of different scenarios, and the only thing I'd recommend being careful about is knowing that they might have a bit of a flicker problem with some cameras. So keep in mind what frame rate you're gonna be shooting at, and don't expect to be able to do any slow motion shots, because the higher your frame rate, the more flicker you're gonna introduce because of the shutter. Now that's totally fine because we're working on narrative projects, and you're gonna have a pretty low frame rate for most of your shots. Just know if you purchase these, they're gonna be mainly for more normal narrative looks. And something I'd like to to try out is if we had a little bit more of expensive equipment, what looks could we end up doing? I'd love to play a little bit with some of the RGBs that could be in the scene to be able to get a more interesting look. All right, if we look at the scene now, we've gone for this weird, edgy blue vibe that really adds some drama into the scene without actually doing that much. Now, the main things that I did is I kept one of the tubes completely white to fill on one side of her face so we had some natural light with all of these strange colors going around. You don't necessarily need to do that, but I love being able to give a little bit of a natural feel to tie in something real to the strange things that are happening. It helps you feel a little bit less distracted by the blue and more allow those things to be things that complement the scene rather than create the entire scene. I changed the backlight that's hitting the background to an orange light. I changed the light that's on the outside of the room, if you look over a little bit to your left, to a completely blue light, which really gives, again, this magical, strange, dramatic feel to the whole scene. And then the light that's hitting the back of her head feels motivated and tied into whatever's hitting her from outside. So, all in all, this is not the same story that we were telling in that film that we were watching. But what's really unique about it is if you change around the lighting, you can tell a drastically different story. And I think that really goes to show how important lighting is in your storytelling. I don't think that this would have matched at all to the story that she was trying to tell before. But I do believe it has a lot of potential to help us understand that there are so many different kinds of stories to tell and that none of them have only to do with what you're writing on paper. It's how you take what's on paper and implement it through a lens, just like you do with a painting. Again, thank you so much for checking out the video. If you want to see more short films get broke down, I'd love to check some out. And if you want me to break your short film down on the lighting and on the story side, reach out to me on my Instagram handle at JVCinema. I'd love to check out some really unique stories over this next year as I grow my ability as a filmmaker and as indie filmmakers inspire me. Thank you so much.